Hello. See, going live on YouTube and Instagram. Wherever you are watching this. Hello. Going live on. There we go. Don't want any feedback there from the YouTube version. Okay. This concept, you guys, gonna blow your mind a little bit. It might bring up a few things. It might make you feel a few things. This is an opportunity to practice letting that be okay. Whatever type of response, if you have curiosities, if you have questions, if you have like, trigger thought, I don't know how I feel about that. This is the place for having those types of discussions. Okay. So comment below, let me hear your thoughts, let me hear your feedback. You can send me emails, you can send me DMs. Like, let's have this conversation because I think it is an important one. And I think what we're about to discuss here is going to change the way a lot of you think and feel and view some of the dynamics that are going on here. Okay. The background for those of you who are new to me, don't know me, born and raised Salt Lake City, Utah, within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? Grew up in the middle of it all, right? Classic true blue Mormon, Molly Mormon, all the things. Even met my husband in seminary, eloped at 19 and got married. Didn't go to BYU, didn't go on a mission, so kind of miss some of those two check marks. But grew up in a family that loved missionaries, was all about them. Always thought I was going to go on them. Always thought I wasn't going to get married until I was like 28. So me actually not doing that and getting married young were sort of like not what I was planning on, not what I was expecting, right? And after that experience, for the last 10 years, I've been in the middle of a spiritual awakening, faith maturation, deconstruction, whatever you want to describe it, experience, right? Where is God real? I don't know. What is spirituality? What isn't it? Like exploring all these different worlds and places for me brought me back to my original faith. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I set aside some of those experiences and then came back and revisited them and thought about them and how do I want to experience them. And today I teach Relief Society in my ward. I love and am good friends with my bishop. I enjoy going to church and the temple. And I also run groups for women who are in all different stages of their faith journeys and who are not even religious. I started an organization called Base Camp Belonging. This is like a pure spiritual group for women to just come and gather and let's talk about what does it mean for you to be a spiritual being? How do you experience it? And I just love being in the spiritual community and the world, both religious and secularly. And so that's a little bit about me and my background, right? And part of what I am passionate about is helping people have a connection with themselves, with God the divine, and with other people. How do you go about navigating that? How do you have a way to move through life as both a human being and a spiritual being, right? I think that's a huge part of us, that there's a spiritual side of us in the world, every way that we move through it, as well as what does it mean to have different types of spiritual leadership and programs and organizations and methodology and looking at systems and structures and how can we better support that spiritual development of individuals and communities. Okay, so that's big picture, sort of where I'm coming from as we're stepping into this conversation, right? And part of where I learned this concept, you are a coach or a mental health professional, you might be familiar with the idea of the drama triangle. We're going to talk about it here in a second, the title of the video here. But it's something that before that, as I was experiencing my elopement with my husband and I, it was like me and him, my parents and his parents, and this huge drama debacle around the whole thing about what was good, what was right, what was God telling each party to do. And a lot of like the last decade has been me spending lots of time of trying to figure out who was right, who was wrong, who were the good guys, who were the bad guys. How do you navigate all of that? And what I came out of it understanding is that there were lots of different perspectives. Oh, hang on, we're toilet training and there's a poop situation. So I'm going to finish this library. Hang on. Let me check on this. right. You get real live and authentic here. So we don't have anything back. We're good. Small poop situation. He's doing awesome. Made it in the toilet. Just needs a little wipe. We're all good. So, but yeah, I came to understand that every person in that relationship and experience was having their own perspective on it. And I started mapping out what these different viewpoints were and how they all contributed to the views that each party had of what was going on in the situation, of what they felt was right or wrong, what needed to be done to fix things. It was kind of cool to see this map show up. And then the more I learned about energetics and masculine and feminine energy, which you're new here, welcome. We talk a lot about masculine and feminine energy. When I say masculine and feminine energy, my little spiel, some of you should know by now, but I'm not talking about gender, sexuality, personality, anything like that. Sometimes it applies to that. Sometimes there's correlations to men and women. Sometimes we talk about it in that specific application, but the idea is it's sort of like ones and zeros. It's a way to two sets of traits to describe and articulate things. And seeing these different patterns of these relationships between the masculine and the feminine counterparts in what was playing out was so helpful to just understand, oh, I know where they're coming from. Oh, I understand where they're coming from. Oh, I see where they're coming from. And it gave this place of I walked away from the perspective of recognizing everybody was right. Everybody was wrong. Everybody did exactly what they were supposed to. And everybody messed up really badly in what they were doing. And that just gave such grace. And it was the perfect example of this balancing of justice and mercy in a way, having that perspective and having that understanding. And then as I dove into the coaching world, I started as a professional organizer, fell in love with helping people understand the why behind their clutter, which brought me to life coaching. In life coaching, I found energetics and took off from that space. And so when I learned about the drama triangle, it was oh, here's another tool that's sort of simplifying and encapsulating this idea. So we're going to go through the basic introduction of what the drama triangle is and a couple applications. And then in the coming days, we're going to be exploring a few different perspectives around it. So this is just part one of a few of these videos discussing the drama triangles. And yeah, so basically the idea of a drama triangle is that in any time you have troubles in a relationship, you can often map it out to there are three different parties who are falling into these different roles. And the roles are there's someone who is a victim, someone who is an aggressor or an oppressor. Kind of depends on if it goes the masculine version or the feminine version. Right? And then the final part is the rescuer. And this is one of the patterns in human nature that we play out all the time, right? And so when you can identify, ooh, I'm putting myself in a victim space and I feel maybe your parents or your boss or whatever, right? They're this other party and my best friend or my sister, they're the one always trying to come and rescue me. And we get stuck in this pattern and cycle. And it's I can't ever break free and we can't improve and we can't resolve things in the relationship, right? Three different parties. Now, human nature kind of has us oscillating between victim and rescuer, right? And wanting to avoid acknowledging ways in which we are being an aggressor or an aggressor, right? And when we look at it within the LDS community world, we have three prominent parties here. We have the church leadership and Orthodox membership. We have the progressive members, and we have the post and ex-Mormon members, as well as the non-members, right? Never having been a part of it. Okay? So I kind of put these two together, progressive together, And we'll see that like this sort of fluctuates a little bit, right? And how we can apply these things. But right, you can have the perspective where often the like church leadership is put in the role of they're the aggressor and the oppressor, and the victim is like the general membership. And then you have the rescuers coming in as like the host or ex-Mormon or non-members being like, guys, you've got to realize like it's not okay, or how this thing is happening, or there's so much more happiness and joy you can have as you're leaving the church. Or you can have the progressive membership here that's like, this is not okay, and I want to come and rescue the regular membership and be like, hey, you got to change the way you're behaving. And so it can happen inside or outside, quote unquote, of the membership in the LDS faith, right? So that can be one way this plays out. But then on the flip side, you can also have like church leadership viewing like post and ex-Mormons and non-members and even progressive members as like they're the aggressors or oppressors, because they're coming after them and saying, you're terrible and you're doing all these horrible things, and don't you realize how you're ruining family lives and things? And they're like, we're the victim, we're trying to do all of these good things and nobody's giving us credit for that, and they don't understand like the spiritual principles and ways that we're trying to help them. And the rescuers can come in as like Orthodox members who are trying to defend the faith and the leadership and say, hey, look, this is what they're doing, this is what's going on, this is what's happening here, right? And you can put just about any person in this role, right? You can also put like church leadership here in the rescuers, and they're like, we're here to rescue the non-members and the post or ex-Mormon members who have been led away, or they're not understanding these principles that would help them be happy in their lives, and ways that they can be saved, and like all those different perspectives here. And the aggressor or the oppressor, you know, maybe the victim here is like the general membership or the progressive members, and they're trying to protect them from the ex-Mormons or the non-members who are trying to pull them out of the church, right? Pick a story dynamic, pick somebody's experience, and you can plug it into these three parties to describe what's going on there, right? And what's really interesting when we see this is why there's a lot of this feeling of like, we're spinning our wheels, we're going in circles, we're not getting anywhere, people aren't listening, communication isn't happening, we're not able to get people to understand these different experiences that are occurring, we're not really resolving anything, we're just kind of like dismissing or leaving or not knowing how to move forward, right? And that's because we're stuck in this dynamic that's playing, right? And it's plaguing all aspects. And having lived, and I still live in Salt Lake City right now, right? Like I see the ways that it impacts my community, right? Regardless of if somebody is a member of the church or not, this dynamic, it plays out. You see it in the workspaces, you see it in the school, you see it in the neighborhood, you see it in the communities. There's this like thing that happens there. And anytime you're in like a highly populated Mormon experience, you kind of get a little bit of that. And the further you go out in sort of the country, the more normal it becomes. But within the culture, we have this dynamic that's playing out, and it's an extremely unhealthy one, right? And what's really cool about it, especially when I hear somebody who is struggling, and I don't care where you are on the spectrum, right? Whether you view yourself as a very active Orthodox traditional in the faith, if you view yourself as very progressive, if you've left the faith, if you've never joined the faith, right? Doesn't matter what part of the plane of existence you're on, right? We're all connected to each other in one way or another. And this is that pattern and dynamic that's playing out. And what will happen is sometimes somebody will try to remove themselves from this experience, right? And say like, oh, I'm gonna like step out here. You can't step outside the triangle. That doesn't resolve it. You're just like stretching the position. The only way you break this pattern from continuing to play out is you remove yourself from the game. You say, I am no longer going to play in these roles, which means I'm no longer going to view myself as a victim, right? So that means anyone that I feel like is oppressing me, is aggressing me, or I need to rescue me, I'm no longer giving that power over them. Because as long as I view somebody as playing one of these roles, I am inherently putting myself in that victim spot. Okay, so you have to change the perspective, and working through that, that's a big thing, right? To work through that. How do you consciously do that? How do you change that? Especially when you have a lot of ample evidence that is like, this is real. This is a thing that is happening. It's going on. It exists. I can't just turn a blind eye to that and pretend like, la, 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 it's not happening. Like it's not occurring, right? Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a difference between the human tangible experience and the things that are going on and the internal state of being, or from an energetics perspective, you could say the vibration that you're in, right? That state of being matters, right? Even within the gospel, right? Where is your heart? Where is that centered place? And a lot of times we like to sort of pat ourselves on the back, myself included, right? Sometimes when we get caught up in these roles, we're like, oh no, but I care about people, or I only want the best for them, or I have an open heart and I have an open mind and I just want people to care, right? But if you are still viewing somebody as a victim, an aggressor, oppressor, or as you're rescuing yourself, that's the sneaky one. Sometimes we don't feel like we're rescuing. Sometimes we feel like we're being an advocate, or sometimes we feel like we're defending truth, or sometimes we feel like we're standing in the right. And it's okay. We're not realizing we're actually contributing to this dynamic playing out over and over and over, right? So you have to remove yourself from viewing yourself as a victim, which means you're giving away your power to somebody else from an internal state of being, right? We're talking about this from changing your internal state of being first, because if we ever want anything to change on the practical, tangible way that we interact with each other, the way you change relationship, it is much more difficult to try and do it from the outside in. If you're trying to work on the human side first, if you're trying to force change externally, it can often only get you so far. And sometimes the experience of doing that is so traumatizing on the parties involved. It takes generations for people to heal from that experience before you can try doing the next wave of addressing things on the internal bit. And it actually prevents that internal change and growth from happening. But when you start on the internal space, you do the work there first. Then when you step into having the discussions and the ideas and how do we resolve this relationship and how do we want to adjust things, how do we want to show up differently, the energy is already different. The internal state is already different. The heart, the beliefs, the mind, like even the nervous system is in a different state, which means when you are trying to be in a relationship, you're going to create something differently, right? This was a pattern I had to break out of in my relationship with my parents, in my relationship with my husband, in my relationship with my in-laws, in my relationship with like my social experience, with my faith. Like I have been through this pattern so many times. I have learned the process, I have learned the tools that help make it so much easier to shift at it. And I have learned how powerful it is to break these drama triangle patterns, right? So removing yourself as a victim. That also means removing the viewpoint of the aggressor or the oppressor. And that is one where a lot of people have a hard time with, right? Because it's like, but it's real. But the trauma I had, but the experiences I've had, I can't just deny those. Or the things that they are doing, the harm that is happening, I can't just ignore those. It's not what I'm saying here, okay? What I am describing, what I'm articulating here is to say, you have to understand that person's perspective. You have to allow them to be who they are fully. Okay? This was one of the difficult things that happened in my husband and I's relationship, and trying to accept each other at who they were. It wasn't just accepting the best parts of who they were, it was also accepting the worst parts of who they were, the parts that hurt us, the parts that were difficult, the part that we didn't want to be there, the part that we were sitting here going, this is the problem, this is why we are having issues in our relationship, is because of this part of who you are. But as long as you have that perspective and that attitude of like, here's this part of you that it needs to be like excised and cut out, you are basically energetically sending that message that there's a part of them that is wrong, that is bad, that is flawed. And there's the human part of us, right? That's where there's truth in it. That's where there's reality in that, of that occurring. But that is not who we are intrinsically. Intrinsically, every single human being, regardless of their human choices and decisions and the way they show up in the world and the experience they move through and the thoughts and feelings and all of that that goes into the human packaging, right? intrinsic part. It's all connected. That's where the human spirit is. That's where we have that thing that binds us, the part of us that is more than human, right? And it is divine, it is whole, it is one. That is where we find our connection. That is where we find our unity. And it doesn't happen by just dismissing or ignoring or saying, you gotta, I love all of you, but this part of you. You have to, in a marriage, accept the darkness and the light in your partner. You have to say, I see your shadows, I see your wounds, I see your sickness. And in that, I still choose to love and have a relationship and connection with you. I am not rejecting this part of who you are, because as much as I am rejecting that part of you, I'm not allowing that part to come into the relationship. I'm not allowing it to be something that we can work on, we can shift, we can learn new ways of being in relationship together, we can change it. It's getting pushed out of the equation. Okay? So when we are viewing somebody as an oppressor or an aggressor in a situation, that's what we're kind of doing, is excising that bit. And from a trauma perspective, that's often a trauma response that's coming up, that we are sitting there going, I've had this horrific experience, or I have such empathy and compassion for somebody who's going through this experience that I want to defend the heck out of them and say, no, this doesn't get to happen anymore. This ends here, right? But there is a difference between, again, excising something and that removal of it, and one that says, hey, I see you, I love you, I know you're more than this, I know you have a potential to be better than this. I want to call you forth. I want to call the goodness out of you and say, this bit here, you got to do something different, right? That is a totally different energy than this is wrong, this is not okay, you can't be doing this. Which one is going to activate a person's nervous system, is going to put them back into the back part of their brain, right? Where they're not thinking clearly, where they're not wanting to operate well, where they're viewing you as a threat and something they need to fight back against, right? They need to protect and defend. It's putting that guard on somebody. And if you're trying to resolve things, if you're trying to create change, you can't be activating some of these primal systems, okay? And we like to put the responsibility and be like, well, they should be better and be more disciplined to not get into an activated space. And it's like, you know what? We've had biology, evolutionary, trying to protect us and keep us alive from threats. Overcoming that is not an easy thing to do. And if you expect and wait for everybody to have a healthy nervous system and be really good on that before you engage with them, you're limiting yourself in the relationships that you can have, right? And that's not to say that you shouldn't hold that standard and you shouldn't hold that expectation and the others shouldn't be doing that work to get to that place. Absolutely. We all need to be doing that. That is the goal, right? But you can't get from where you are to where you want to be by saying the only way I'm going to do that is by expecting that everybody is at the goal. You have to walk the steps. You have to go on the journey. You have to progress. You have to walk that path, right? And part of walking that path is acknowledging not just where you are, but where the other party is too, right? And learning this sort of weaving, walking together bit as you move forward, rather than just, okay, well, I reached here and you better come and meet me. You got to go on your own journey. You got to make this happen, right? That is what I call, there's sort of this perspective in the healing world, whether it's therapeutically, like in therapy with, you know, psychologists and your counselors, whatever, or in the like spiritual world of doing your inner work and healing, and coaches kind of overlap in both, right? There's kind of this attitude, a backbone. There's kind of this attitude of like, I'm going to do my work and I expect you to do your work, and I can't be in relationship with anyone until they've done their work, right? This is a failure to understand the different layers of relationship and how we move through it. The first one is, yes, doing our individual work. It's important. It is a solid foundation. It's important that that happens, right? But doing the work independently is actually not as efficient, right? It sometimes feels easier because it can be really hard to do what I call healing through relationship. When you do healing through relationship, you have to sort of have this, I'm working on something, you're working on something, and there's sort of this like tension moments as the two of you are evolving and growing. And there's times where you feel very much diametrically opposed in that. But the strength of that relationship actually allows you to work through things faster and more efficiently than just doing it all on your own. But a lot of people don't know how to navigate that. They don't know how to do healing work in relationship. They just get to this like tension point and they either stop and maybe try again, stop and try again, and eventually get so exhausted that usually the relationship maybe finds some clearing or ends, right? Or there's some sort of like distant that happens. And this is where we get like the roommate things where it's like, we're moving through life, but we're not really connected. We're not really like together, feeling close or bonded or things, right? And that is another common experience that plays out when you're in this drama triangle bit. So learning how to view somebody who has hurt you or harmed you or is doing something wrong or believes something wrong, and how can you still be in relationship with them is a key part of breaking this triangle. And that doesn't always mean, good, important asterisk we need to put here, right? That you always have to actually stay around them. There's a process to this. There's an energetic pattern that says there's the individual level, there's the partnership level, there's the family level, which family can be chosen or like the family you're born into or the children you have, right? It's just like your people, your tribe, right? Then your community, and then the collective, right? Which is like the public experience. And we have to go on this journey of healing through all the different layers. And I see a lot of people who have done the individual work over the last couple of years. They've been on a journey, they've been doing a lot of that, and it's kind of brought them into the partnership level. And they're sort of trying to figure out the family level, right? And feeling like, okay, well, I've kind of found my people, but the community levels where we're starting to reach, right? And we're not really sure how to do this relationship healing between the two different parties. One party in the community level is always in the feminine, another party's in the masculine, just like every part of that level. You have masculine and feminine energy within yourself. Within a relationship, one person takes the masculine and the feminine, you kind of dance between them sometimes, different roles. Same thing in the familial level and this community level, right? This is where we have to understand, how do we be in relationship without trying to excise the other and say, everybody has to be in the feminine energy, everybody has to be in the masculine energy. That's where we get this sense of like divide, whether it's political, whether it's about education, whether it's in faith, right? On every system level, we have this thing of like, there's two opposing forces here against each other. That's usually each one is viewing like, this is how you're the aggressor or oppressor. This is, and it's like, you're aggressive because you're coming after me and telling me I'm wrong, or you're aggressive or oppressive. You're oppressing me about against these things that are right and good, right? We have to break out of that cycle. And then we try and get in, always trying to bump ourselves into that higher position of, oh, I'm the rescuer. I'm coming in to help people break out of this and no longer be free and free themselves, right? The way that you do this is you have to move yourself into the center, right? You no longer, you're operating, you could even say, here's, I have this marker here on like a different plane. You're up here on the blue tip. You're not even on this two-dimensional space anymore. You're out here. And what that does is it breaks the actual pattern. These dynamics don't fall, and it starts to help other people be able to shift and find their own orientation. And then when you're all oriented in a different way, now you can actually move forward in a different experience in the way that you progress. Okay? So we're going to be discussing this more. We're going to be talking about how you find that center point, what that center point looks like. It's also individual, as well as like there's patterns and processes to it, how you break out of these. We're going to be describing, again, some of these different perspectives in the drama triangle. I want to just kind of introduce you to this idea right now. And I'd love to hear from you. What resonates with it about it? What do you kind of, I'm not quite sure about that, or I have questions about this, or how does that fit into it, right? Let's have a conversation about this again. My DMs are open. Send me an email, comment below. Let's explore this. How does this idea sit with you? Because to me, it feels like this is part of the key, right? We've got to end this pattern. It's not healthy for any of us. And we're ready and longing for something more. This is how we're going to find more connection. This is how we're going to build that healing in our communities, in our families, and of our marriages and our individual lives, right? This is a key part of it. Let me know. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Okay. Hey, those of you here who have been watching on YouTube, welcome. I'm usually talking to the Instagram people, so I'm sorry that my eyes are like not at you. But I do like putting them here on YouTube so that it can be easier to share, easier to like go back and listen to, because sometimes it's hard to do that on Instagram. So this is here for you to explore. I'd still love to hear from you. Check me out on Instagram, that LDS Energy Gal, period between every word. You can email me, EmilyCarolynBaker@gmail.com. The description is here on YouTube. Or you can just comment below on the video. So hope you have a wonderful day.